back in not the same room, smaller room. Mr. Kestelecki reminds me that people should fill this blue sheets out, so we make sure to get a right-sized room next time. It's 13:20. We're going to start the meeting, the SIDROPS meeting. If you're not here for SIDROPS, you're in the wrong room. For those presenting, please make sure to talk into the mic like this. Hold the mic. Don't use the stand. If you do this, no one can hear you. If it's in the stand and you're doing this, I can't hear you either. There's a nice thing in front of the presenters. They can read that instead of doing this. Also very nice. We have a, yep, you can laser point to it. Like, you can see what I'm pointing at. I can't see what I'm pointing at. It doesn't work on the LCD. It works over here. We're in SIDROPS in IETF 106. I am ROC, and that is KR.
Good afternoon.
Okay. We have a clicker that works. Okay. We have a Jabber person, Natalie? Or no? Yes.
I'm fine with whatever you like.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. Do we have a minutes taker or another person who'd like to type on the keyboard during the meeting?
If you give me 2 minutes, I will figure out if I can use extra.
Okay, perfect. We'll delay. Natalie can take notes. Minutes, they're called. Strawberry Man is here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'll make my attempt next time to not hide the room. Oh, the other thing for the people that are presenting, Medico would like you to stand on the pink square, Randy Bush. Pink square. You'll see when you get up here. Cross. Fine, whatever. It's a parallelogram. It's 7 parallel lines. 5 of which are transparent. Okay. Somebody else will have gotten that joke, I'm sure. Okay, ready, Joe?
The Wi-Fi is
It's coming.
IP6 challenged.
Okay.
It's loading.
Okay.
I'll get there.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I'm there.
Okay, good. We'll just move ahead. Blue sheets for those who didn't get them earlier. We can pass them to the back. There's a note well for the meeting. I'm sure that by this day of the meeting, you've seen this a few times. It's in small print intentionally. It doesn't have all of the resources. That's further on. Okay, so today we have 6 presentations, not counting this one. Hopefully we'll be done quickly with our part. Those times are approximate. They probably don't add up to the right time. I didn't pay attention. So draft statuses, there's some stuff that we have to push into the editor's queue out of working group last call. There's at least 2 things, I think, KR?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a couple of more. The last thing in IESG processing is LTA use cases. I think that's stuck for a long time, and I don't exactly remember why. It'll pop out eventually. And the things that are probably the ones that need to go into the editor's queue are things like OV egress. I think somebody's complained about that. Sent a message about that. A couple of the others here will as well. So we'll hear about those, I'm sure, at the mic, and afterwards we'll scrape through the mailing list and figure it out. Okay, first person up is Tim.
Almost a square.
Almost. Which one is yours called?
That one. Yeah. All right. So deprecate rsync. Why? Well, first off, as you know, rsync is used in the RPKI. So is another protocol that was invented here, RRDP. So the RPKI repository Delta protocol for friends. And what I'm proposing here, I made a draft just in my own name. It doesn't have to stay like that. I'm actually looking for some people mentioned to me that they want to co-author as well. But I wanted to get something out quickly, so I did that. But before going into all of that, a quick reminder: why did we invent the Delta protocol? there you can talk about this for longer, but mainly, in order to run an rsync repository reliably, it's not that easy. And with RDP, you can leverage CDNs, so the job becomes a bit more, less challenging, I would say. And also from the relying party point of view, most software ends up calling the rsync binary on a system which may have different behaviors on different systems. Those would be my top reasons why I would want to get rid of it. How? Well, this might be controversial, so it's here intentionally because I think we should have discussion about this. Pragmatically speaking, I propose to keep the rsync URIs, even though a repository might not be available at that location. And the reason is that if we update the certificate profile, this can lead to things becoming rejected, and that will make deployment much harder. There is some prior art in XML, where namespaces are HTTP URIs quite often, and there may not be anything there. I don't particularly like it. I think it's ugly, but on the other hand, we do need names for things for debugging. And I'm trying to avoid breaking things. And that's why I'm proposing this. So, but we can have that discussion. Also, we could instruct relying parties to prefer RDP if it's available. And ultimately, phase out rsync. But when? There's a bit of a chicken and egg problem here. I didn't find good pictures of chicken and eggs. Maybe I didn't look well enough. But essentially, this is the situation. You have many repositories, you have many relying parties, and the relying parties talk to all the repositories. And repositories will need to support rsync as long as can only drop support for rsync if all the relying parties support the alternative. And vice versa, relying parties can only drop support for rsync when all repositories support the alternative. And I think measurement should fit into that, because if you look at the road there, then Randy wrote a proposal actually that can work, but I'm not sure that we have to tie it down to that. But to repeat what you said, Randy, and you can correct me later if I'm wrong, is that, well, you can start from the repository side. You can say, now you all go support RDP. Once that's done and you hit the green button, there was a light here, right? So they all support it. Then you could say to RPs, well, some of you support it, most of you support it, but please now all start supporting it. And then you can measure with research and measurements whether people actually deploy these new versions. And at some point you can then say, okay, now the repositories can phase out rsync. But in my view, I'm not sure that this should be a heavy segment of the document. I think in the eventual document, the final document, it should probably not be there at all. In my view, because I think it should just talk about what it updates. But of course, this is an important discussion to have. In my view, I think we should aim for having everybody move forward in parallel, because I don't see why that cannot happen. Meaning that we would ask relying party software implementers to also support RDP, even if not all the repositories already have it. So, but first, questions, and well, this is not even a working group document, so that's also another question that might go to the list. So, the floor is yours.
Jeff Houston. There were many mistakes and bad ideas in the original work that developed this. And one of them was rsync. I actually think that the problem that we got given, which was the entire X509 distributed repository mess and the inability to sort of smash them all together was a really terrible problem to get given. And opportunistic pull was a solution clutched out of desperation rather than a hard design. the problem is actually reliable flooding of information, right? And we're doing that by opportunistic grab in an n-squared mesh. And it just seems to be wrong. And when you rephrase it as flooding, reliable flooding, and you actually look at protocols like BGP, which is actually a reliable flooding algorithm. And if you think that you don't necessarily have to do routing information and route objects, BGP is actually an amazing protocol, as many other people have used for many other purposes. If I tell you something, I've told you. I never retell you. You never have to ask me again. I've told you it for the life of the session. The whole issue around the way it gets flooded is actually not a bad approach. And I kind of wonder if we're going to drop all this stuff about rsync and replacing it with yet another opportunistic grab polling algorithm, you've kind of exchanging one model of anchor for another. Neither of them float. And although I might be accused of going, well, the perfect is the enemy of the good here, I thought we could do better. And if the abstract problem really is, I want reliable flooding of what's inside repositories, maybe we should look further afield than just replacing the underlying mechanism of this particular protocol and look at it in an architectural sense and go, are there alternatives we can piggyback that actually do reliable flooding so that when I publish in my repository, it just flows through everyone else? So that's what I would urge us to think about before simply just going to this particular solution, because it doesn't change a lot. Thanks.
Yeah, can I briefly respond to that? Or?
Sure.
Because, well, in my view, it's quite interesting to look at BGP as a flooding protocol for this. But I think there will be many things that need to be figured out, and it's going to be a while before that's a reality. At this moment, I think supporting rsync is impacting people, and it's low-hanging fruit to do that first, whilst in parallel you can look at alternatives. At least that's my my take on it.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. I oppose using BGP for flooding this. Before I retire, I don't know whether some research group will be looking into more optimal solutions than this. Some problems with rsync are known. The RRDP has been developed as a probably working solution. We do not have the proof in actual scaled operations. I think we need some document that explains the roadmap for actually getting forward. For the question of how eggs and poultry are bred, my take is actually the repositories have to move first. That does not preclude getting the implementation for clients. Quite obviously, if the roadmap says the repositories actually should work on providing a reliable service before clients start to rely on them or even start to do large-scale operational testing. Yeah, and yes, kind of a fixed time schedule, I think, is not going to work. The schedule has to be conditionalized on criteria that say, well, okay, if we achieve that kind of operational status on the repository side, we tell client side to move somewhere.
Hi, Dima from ARPI's open source Reliant Party project. Tim, I like your idea, but I'm wondering whether you have existing nodes with repository manager. So whether it's easy for them to support Delta protocol.
Well, I no longer work for the RIPE-NCC, but we deployed there, and there's some experience there. And I think with all new software, there's an initial phase of getting it right. I think the tricky part of that protocol is generating those files reliably, but serving them, on the other hand, is quite easy. But I agree also with what Rudiger said, that we should build up operational experience with running this, but some people have been doing that. So particularly RIPE-NCC and APNIC, and others are in the process of developing and deploying as well.
Thank you. So for your information, in our testbed, I think Delta is working much better than rsync. So yes.
Randy Busharkus and IIJ. I don't think Jeff went far enough, and I don't think Jeff went far enough. And I have a T-shirt that says BGP awarding PhD theses since 1994. And I think other bullish males pushed BGP down our throats when we really should have considered IDRP more seriously. I have also a problem, Tim, with the chicken and egg, because that is not the case. There is a sequence that gets you both poultry and dinner. Do you have a problem with the sequence I suggested? I mean, do you have another sequence which doesn't drop stuff on the floor and gets you to the end?
I think we may actually mean a very similar thing. What I mean to say is that I would encourage relying party implementers to already start supporting RDP.
Definitely.
Right, and I don't want to wait until all the repositories have it.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that...
Haven't we done that already?
No, I think some still need to implement.
Oh, well, no, haven't we encouraged them?
Oh, right. Well, maybe, but if we put it in a document that's
Oh, yeah,
formal
yeah, yeah, yeah.
encouragement, let's say.
But so are you suggesting a document that only stops at encouraging them or lays out the whole sequence?
I'm in two minds about including a sequence. I think it's useful during this discussion and the coming period, but if eventually you have a document that updates the existing standard documents, I'm not sure that it should still include a roadmap. But you can have a roadmap whilst you're talking about this stuff and maybe keep it in a document because it's a convenient place to put it. But once it becomes RFC, then I'm not sure that a roadmap is going to get outdated, I'm afraid. But maybe we should take this offline. It's not that I violently oppose it, but I don't want to end up with a document that is going to be out of date the moment it's published. And you have that risk when you include roadmaps in it.
I'm perfectly happy with documents that go out of date once they're successful.
2 minutes left.
Job Snijders, NTT, OpenBSD. I would be supportive of offering, let's call it a BCP, titles using rsync to distribute RPKIs considered harmful. And it is good if the IETF puts out a signal to publishers and consumers of the published information that rsync is not the preferred method to disseminate this data. If in an appendix to such a document a roadmap is included, that may be beneficial, but at least statements need to be published that we do not like rsync and we need to state why we don't like rsync for this purpose.
Also be obsolete.
Rob Ostein, Arcus and Dragon Research Labs. A couple of comments quickly since I know we're running out of time. First of all, to people who didn't quite get Tim's comment about why we want to keep the rsync URIs, The problem is without that, all you basically have is hashes, because we very, very carefully removed all identifying information from the RPKI. And the only thing that was left is the URIs. If you take the URIs away too, then what you have is hashes, lots and lots and lots of hashes, which gets kind of confusing pretty quickly. Secondly, I slightly disagree about the marshaling the data into RDP being difficult. Actually, it's not. Yeah, we implemented this, 4 years ago? We had to re-implement portions of our CA code, but it's because our CA code was, in retrospect, designed badly. It should have been doing basically a transactional model to begin with. As soon as you go to a transactional model, this is just, you generate a delta for every transaction, done. It's trivial. There are a few interesting characteristics on the RP side, though. In particular, when you're dealing with a very, very large collection like the RIPE NCC collection, the validation behavior is different. Okay, if you've got, I'll just use as poster children, I'm not throwing rocks at anybody. As poster children, you have APNIC as the holdouts for the least efficient possible way of doing rsync, and you have RIPE NCC as the early adopters for a big one of RDP. The one nice thing about the rather strange thing that APNIC does is you can kind of do all the crypto in parallel, right? Fetch, 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 and the fetch is so slow that by the time you're done fetching, you've also done all the validation. With the RIPE model, it's a little stranger than that. With the RIPE model, you have to wait while you transfer and process and suck into the database, which unfortunately is slow, all of that data before you can start validating any of it, really. Now, maybe there's some efficient way to do it I haven't figured out yet, but to a first approximation, you have to eat the whole update, apply all the deltas, and unfortunately, databases tend to be bad about doing this quickly. And then you have to do all the validation as this massive chunk. So the behavior is a little different. I think this protocol is actually pretty much ready. Whether or not we are ready to deprecate rsync is a different issue, but I think this protocol is mature enough to go.
Sorry, Rob, are you saying to adopt it then? Or adopt it and just straight to working group last call?
I was not actually expressing a straightforward opinion about whether or not we ought to just throw rsync out the airlock at this point in time.
Okay. But your question is, should we adopt this?
Yeah, but I guess I need to send that to the list.
Yeah. Okay.
And but thanks for all the feedback. I think that really helps. And yeah, also available for offline discussion about this week. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Asimov. I think. Ooh, this one?
No.
No? This one? No. This one? No. I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe they came last minute. I didn't get them. We could do that. Could work. Let's see. I don't know that I got them.
1044, right here. Yeah.
What are they called? Oh, yeah. No, I didn't upload those for sure. Hold on. Too much going on. Why don't you, is there one you want to start with?
I will start with SP.
Okay. Try Gmail. We could do that, yeah. We'll try that. Of course, now I don't have my chair slide, so I have no idea who's next. Hold on.
Hang on. I have it. Randy Bush.
Oh, Randy. How about Randy?
Transfer.
Mr. Bush. Yours are easy to find. You're up. Then we'll do Mr. Asimov. Clicker? Okay.
So back many, many years ago, we drafted this document, and essentially it's transfer of resources between two registries, known ASs and IP numbers, By registry and the rest of this discussion, we mean ISPs, RIRs, NIRs, et cetera. We're not going to transfer between two IANAs. It should be doable. And we kind of have to do it fairly often, actually. How often do you do transfers, Natalie? Often, she says. Okay. And just to get some terminology, there's the seller and the buyer, and the swing point is the IR at the lowest point in the hierarchy, which the seller and buyer have as a common parent, and which is agreed to act as the agent. If this one doesn't agree, their parent could be the swing point, is what's subtly mentioned there. And there was actually an internet draft, I'm not sure whether it became an RFC or not, that talked about parents, grandparents acting with authority. I don't remember, but that it didn't make it to RFC. Yeah, I remember writing it because of this problem. But anyway, I'm going to breeze through this fairly quickly because the point of this exercise is really not transfer. Okay, simple transfer is the seller separates out the resources and tells the swing point. The swing point, without deleting these resources, without deleting this delegation, creates and gives them to the buying IR. Okay. The swing point delegates to the buyer, and then the swing point withdraws from the seller when agreed. Okay. And Steve Kent said he was going to write up something I jokingly called the Torn Euro Protocol, which is they tore a Euro bill. Each of them has it. And when both of them turn that bill into the swing point, when the swing point receives both halves, then it can withdraw. But until then, both delegations are active because we want this is just a side, hey, you can have things where the seller's double indirect. You can have things where the buyer's double indirect. Who cares? There's a problem that you want make before break. You want both of these active at the same time because possibly circuits are moving. Possibly other administrative problems are occurring in that transfer. And actual operation of the internet is depending on both of these being make before break. The point of my story today is the RIRs are driven by underlying data, which I'll call stats files, but some of them call them something else. Some of them have their authoritative data hidden, and the stats file is merely a realization of it. But it makes no difference. The problem is these files, I believe, in all the RIRs, are one-to-one mappings. This resource may only be owned by one IR at a time, which means break before make. Okay, now there's no blame. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Okay, and the question is, how do we help the RIRs get out of this position? Okay, so the RPA-KI structure can do it. It's real easy. It's the RIRs have a problem with these one-to-one mappings. Okay, so what we have today is not operationally viable. This was brought to my attention by an LIR who actually broke. Okay, so Where do we go with the transfer document? Shall we move it forward or not? I don't know. And how do we help the RIRs become unstuck from this problem? And I think that's my last slide. And I managed to stay on the degenerate square.
Very good. 4 minutes for questions.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. I seem to remember that Steve Kent at some point did a draft that allowed some outside of RPKI signaling of something like this being in process. First of all, criteria for relying parties that want to check whether the RPKI certificate system actually looks reliable, quite obviously include the criterion that it looks very suspicious if a resource is claimed by two parties in parallel. Signaling when this is actually intended and authorized is something essentially needed there. As far as RIR keeping of data, it would seem to be fairly straightforward to have markers, to have annotation on resources. This is outgoing. And potentially a time limit, and it would be nice to have that published so that discriminating relying parties actually can figure out if they see strange things.
In the classic words of Vince Periello, send code. I think the problem, I think there's a lot of software tied to those stats files is the problem.
A point of Job Snyder's NTT. A point of clarification. I would like to ask you: are you talking about transfers inter RIR or intra RIR?
We see the problem today intra RIR. The problem, I believe, exists inter RIR. And
so now
having been the first victim, or actually I wasn't a victim, I was very happy with the experience of transferring between RIRs. It was make before break.
So since we're venturing into the political landscape anyhow, there may be use cases where it is desirable that the transfer only half completes and the certificates continue to coexist in multiple RIRs from a redundancy perspective.
Inter-RIR is probably simpler in the current universe due to the perverse political situation. Yes.
And I think this work is very much worth considering and progressing through this working group. So I'd be interested to...
Yeah, we got to do something. Actually, what we have to do, I think, is helping the RIRs figure out how to not break before make. Moving the transfer document is something we can do at our leisure.
Right. Tim Prijsels. Yeah, no, I'll keep it really short. I think we should talk about this offline. I read the document. I get a bit scared of the mechanics that are proposed. And I think we can aim for simpler solutions. And I'm not yet convinced that you need to signal these things to anybody looking at the RPKI. Maybe you can leverage the provisioning protocol Well, let's have a talk
I
later,
don't think
guess.
this document, my memory is this document doesn't suggest that.
I'm saying I'm not sure that you need the signaling of the intent to have a transfer done in the RPKI. And if you do, I'm not sure that this is the way to do it. But let's, for the sake of time, maybe have that discussion, not right here, right now, because I don't think there's time for it.
As long as it's quick.
For an attempt at code, I get the nasty idea. The RIRs presented us with an applicability statement as an internet draft that pointed to a certain file for disambiguating potential conflicts in the RPKI. It would be very simple, I guess, to add in that file another column that says, okay, this resource is moving somewhere. This is a nasty comment, and I don't think it is actually going to work, but it might be actually a practical way.
Right. Okay. On the break side, for example, provisioning protocol, you ask a question to your parent, you say, what are my entitlements? It tells you what they are. They might be less than what you had. There's no grace period, for example. That's one thing you might consider, that you can communicate to a child that something will be shrunk. Go clean up. That's one thing you can think of. On the side of initiating all this, there's other offline processes involved as well. So I'm not sure that the RPKI should be driving this. I'm not even sure that anybody else needs to know that a thing is going on, but if you do, then yes. Currently, the proposal is to create a separate certificate with all the resources that are going to be transferred on it. I'm not sure that that's the way to do it. You can also invent a signed object that says these resources are going to be transferred. I would think that's already easier. So just, we can have more discussion, but that's at the beginning of it.
And a quick question for you about where do we go from here? There were lots of comments that you got, and Job said this is work that this working group can take. So do you want us to issue a call on this?
I think
You ready?
there's two bullets here, and I think what we're strongly agreed on is the second one, which is not pushing a document.
Okay.
Mr. Asimov, I believe we have your documents now, although I've got to figure out how to tell this thing to reload. Okay, max length, second one. All right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Asimov. I work for Yandex, and this will be a rather quick update. Thanks. About ASP drafts. During this year, Randy was fighting with me to make the draft less ambiguous, to have clear description about the procedures that are present in this draft. And this slides is another attempt that failed. So the clicker is not working.
Look, it's not working.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you're pushing on the button. Are you holding it wrong? No.
Yeah. Try this.
Yeah. Oh, that's not the right one, but it's this thing. The other full screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So take it, please, as an oversimplified description of the solution without no peerings and unknowns and so on. The ASP drafts suggest two procedures. First procedure for prefixes that are received from customers and peers, and the second procedure for prefixes that are received from providers. And for if we are receiving prefixes from the customers and peers, the only pairs that may exist in the IS path is customer to provider, customer to provider, customer to provider. As you can see here, if we detect a single pair that is provider to customer, or at least it's not customer to provider, so sorry for ambiguity of these slides, it's an invalid path. The downstream path, it may have both upstream path and downstream subpath. But if it is followed again by an upstream path, it's a route leak. So don't look at the slides, listen what I'm speaking about. It's very simple and very hard to describe, not in code, but with words and slides. So there were also questions about deployment process. And it's very important to bring immediate benefit for the ISP, who will be the first one to sign first ASP record. And ASP does it, because as soon as it signs ASP record, it gives a chance to other parties to detect mistake route leaks. So it's very important, no islands, no cooperation, it just works. For malicious activity, it's slightly a harder process, but it's not that hard. So you need to create raw records too. So it's also up to you. And your security also relies on your upstream providers. If you're happy to be tier one, you are not relying to anybody. So if you sign ASP records, there's the only thing that is needed to protect yourself from malicious activity. If you are tier two, you rely on your upstream providers. So the changelog, I hope it will not bring additional ambiguity, so it's rather simple. After the suggestions in the mailing list, we changed ASP profile from pairs that were customer and provider to pairs where we have customer and set of providers to solve possible synchronization issues. We also added another state for verification procedure, which is unspecified. So we have valid, invalid, unspecified. It will not be that useful at the state of early adoption, but can give you additional debug opportunities at the state of middle adoption or high adoption rate. I've added some beautiful drawings that shows how the state between valid, invalid, and unknown are changing. I'm not sure if this made the draft more readable, but I hope you enjoyed it, at least enjoyed it. And we've got first implementation on top of that. Many thanks goes to Evgeny Bogomazov and Andrei Zachezek. I hope I pronounce it rightly. I know that there is another implementation coming, so we're good here. So, and now action plan. Please read the drafts. We need your feedback because we need at least another person which will start telling me that the way I'm writing text ruining the principle of least astonishment. So if you want this work to proceed quickly, please give us feedback, help us to work on the text. On our side, we will receive your feedback, work on it, and we'll try to finish working on the text until the next IETF meeting. Randy also promised that he will work on RTR protocol. And so this is the last missing part. So we will have 3 drafts, 1 profile, 1 verification, and RTR that is supposed to go together to the working group last call. So that's all. Randy?
Randy Bush, IIJ and Arcus. Randy promised to do the RPKI router protocol when the object was clearly designed and clearly not going to significantly change as the profile document progresses.
I do agree, and since we have changed the profile, I believe we have a stable version of our object.
Secondly, I really think the draft needs some reading by a couple other people because some of the authors are in disagreement of its clarity.
Yeah. Hands up for this. Please read the draft. Give us feedback. It's very important.
All right. Tim Wijsels, I read the profile draft in particular, better than the other one. And I left a comment on the list I want to repeat here. So this is not a big deal, but only the customer AS actually needs to be present on the end entity certificate in the signed object. And I would think it would be good to recommend people that they don't include anything else. Because if you do, then you run an unnecessary risk, because if any of those resources are no longer held by the certificate signing that ASPA object, then the whole ASPA object will become invalid. And I think it's easy to avoid. You can just have the one AS only, and then so.
Yeah. Thank you for your comment, and thank you for your previous comments that highlighted possible issues with pair of provider and customer.
To clarify, I think the text currently says that the object is valid as long as the customer AS is in the set that is on the EE certificate. And I would suggest that you keep that EE certificate small in terms of resources, because you only need to have that AS, that customer AS there. You don't need anything else. So I wouldn't include anything else, because if you do, that's just a avoidable risk of things that can break.
Rudiger, you give up. Yeah. Okay. This is my second set of slides, and they are not related to any draft, but I believe they can bring valuable considerations for this working group. So, and we will discuss, as you see, max length. The default behavior. Normally, when we are speaking about default behavior or default settings, we're expecting that these kind of settings are working in most of cases. And for a current RPKI object raw, the default behavior suggested to be drop invalids or reject invalids. Don't accept invalids. So when route becomes invalid, there are two options. First option, if there is a mismatch in the autonomous system numbers. And the second option is that the prefix length is bigger than the length specified in the raw object. So, as you have already guessed, we will spend next 5 minutes discussing if max length applicable for with the default suggestion that such routes should be rejected. Randy, can I move forward? No. Yeah. I'm sorry, some typos are included. Yeah, there will be another typos on the next slide. So I'm sorry, it's not Afnik, it's Afrenik. I've tried to contact all current reels to find out what are the default settings when people are creating max length. Because as you know, the hosted creation of rows is the current trend. So nearly all of them were answering just the same thing. They're looking at the prefixes that are active at the moment and creating max length that is equal to the prefix length. Good. From now. But there are okay. But there are a couple of problems. First, if we will take the side of ingress filtering, you cannot drop invalids in case of customer sending you a black hole route. From egress side, it's just the same. So if you are sending a black hole route, you cannot just blindly drop invalids. And it is related to Rudiger's draft, and he is already in line. But there is another issue. Let's take a look from the security perspective. From the security perspective, in a perfect world where API is globally deployed, we will have raw, and I hope we'll also have a spare objects. And to stop both malicious activity and mistakes, we don't need max length. And there is another point, and it is more crucial at the state, because it happens at the state of partial adoption. Imagine you're a happy possessor of network /23. And you have created ROAs with help of some web interface. And your upstream provider is a good fellow, and he already using a raw validation procedure. But somewhere, another guy makes a typos, and he hijacks your prefix, and it's going to be propagated, and it's more specific, and you cannot fight it. Because you first need to update roles. After that, you need to call your upstream provider. Okay, if you are using egress filtering, it's slightly simpler, but again, it doesn't provide you a way to fight malicious, not malicious, but mistakes rapidly. So it creates additional security risks at the stage of partial adoption. And so it's already here. I've copied it yesterday from NIST, and it says that a half of invalids that are in the wild are for correct atom system number and incorrect max length. There are networks that have already put this issue into consideration, and some of them are setting max length to the maximum values as it's possible. This way, I suggested to fix this issue because I was thinking about these risks a couple of years ago. But recently, I've learned from several players, some of them have very big names, that they are already hacking on top of API cache. So they're increasing max length on their side to accept invalids from their peers and from their customers. And of course, these are all connected. What is set by default in hosted CAs in routing registries. I'm not giving you any kind of solution at the moment, but I'm asking this working group, do you consider this as a problem that should be taken into account? If you think we should work on this issue, let's discuss possible solutions. Rudiger.
Okay. There is, in my opinion, absolutely no question. The correct default for ROAs is a simple ROA with max length equal to the prefix length.
Okay.
That's the basic ROA. The max length longer might be something that should be only available in expert mode of the user interface after examination, that people have a rough idea what they are doing.
May I interrupt you and ask you, as a co-author of egress filtering, how do you see deployment process of this draft if the default policy drop invalids is not working for the leaves? Because I don't think that the target audience of this draft is Deutsche Telekom. When I first saw this draft, I was thinking, oh, great. So the stupid guys will protect themselves from making mistakes. But if it's not working by default, I'm not thinking they will deploy it.
I have to think about it, but I guess that if ROAS, if you want to pass routes that are actually invalid with
I don't.
Well, I heard you ask about certain routes you wanted to pass yesterday.
When we talked the day before yesterday, I I had some more radical thinking about this issue. At the moment, I believe that if you flip the coin and give max length for the experts, instead giving the default, like is specified, for example, by some companies that already see the risks, it might be flying from the box.
Well, if for my own network,
For your own network,
it is quite clear OV egress will help me to shortcut stupid misconfigurations that my colleagues are doing. For customers, kind of the ingress policy will ensure that I will not accept invalids there, except for the cases where we have a special agreement. And that special agreement quite certainly will have implications for special handling on the egress side, if there is actually an egress side.
Yeah, but again, I really regret that not all companies in the world are Deutsche Telekom. And
That's not one issue.
Okay. Okay, I will not list each company that is present in this room, but anyway, but take into account the idea that as far as I understand, the target audience for egress draft is lifts, and to make it working at lifts side, you need to make it as simple as possible. The principle "keep it simple, stupid" is the only way to make it global, or not global even, but at least partial adopted. Not only by big players, because I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of lifts.
Jeff Haas, trying to keep this short. The max length stuff is obviously advice to the global internet at large. This is what the global internet should be seeing for these things. The misconfigurations we tend to see here are often things that you want to have longer show up for some scoped purpose in many cases. The black holes typically need to go 1 AS over. Same thing is true in many cases of various types of TE routes, something that might be a little bit longer than what you're willing to announce to the world at large. The two things that can be done here is that the parties that are next to each other that are cooperating can just simply configure something into their system that says that we're willing to ignore the RPKI answer for this because we've otherwise done validation. We know that this is a valid origin, it's following the paths for my filters, and I'm willing to accept it because it's a little bit longer. The other thing that could be done is to maybe provide some sort of hint into the ROA objects themselves for these narrow scopes of things, that it's okay if you are here. But for your more general case of you're seeing something much longer and trying to mitigate an attack, I think that's a much harder problem to solve.
Okay, thank you for comment. Yep.
Job Snijders, NTT. It is quite tricky to, at this stage of the game, fiddle with the semantics of max length, because we're deploying, the snowball is rolling down the hill, and for better or for worse, some things kind of are what they are right now. You identified a specific case, black holing. For that, I brought up a different approach where we make black hole route requests rely on less specific routes, which then can be pumped through the origin validation procedure. So it may be that for the black hole use case, we don't need to do anything in SIDROPS, but rather document a novel way of black hole routing in GROW. But if there are other use cases that may still allow this conversation to continue. But as you explain things right now, I would remove black holing because there are, I think, more feasible, more pragmatic solutions for that.
Do you expect...
Can I interject, guys? We're seriously out of time. It'd be great if you take it on the list. Thank you.
Small point of order. Meet Echo Jabber Room is not reachable from my laptop anymore, so I cannot at this moment scribe.
Okay, you have to scribe here. Okay, thank you. D. Did you want this one or the other one first?
This one.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's
Go fast.
Hi, folks. I'm Dima from ZDS, and I'm also working for RPSTER, open source project for RPK Reliant Party. So I'm here to report to the working group, like say a few words about the update after this informational document since its working group last call. And during the working group last call, we had got some comments, we got some supports. After that, we also made update accordingly, especially by adding local control to reference IFC 8416, which is suggested by Lick Hillard, and making some wording improvements as suggested by Oleg Muravsky. And then we made a further update because some reference draft has been published as RFC documents. Okay. At present, we also believe this document is ready to move forward and request for chair's actions. So next step, I'm waiting for your actions. Any suggestion?
We can issue the last call.
Yeah. I think I would just ask that you email the list to ask. Otherwise, we will likely forget, or at least I will likely forget. So just email us. I'd like to make last call for this thing, please. Quick.
Thank you.
I don't see your other slides on this, and that's concerning me because I put them on there. Hold on. Oh, wait, sorry.
That is one.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Dima again. I would like to take this opportunity to brief implementation of synchronizing RPKI in the cache by distributing cache data in JSON over HTTPS. So before I touch upon the very topic of my presentation, so let's review the RPKI cache deployment scenarios as discussed in IFC 8210. The background for the following discussions. As far as I comprehend the RPKI cache deployment scenario describing IFC 8210, two concurrents could be made that not all networks have to set up its own RP system to do RPKI data synchronization and verification. And RPK validated cache is not necessarily transported to routers, but between two intermediate nodes arranged in a hierarchical scheme. Last year, as my team was establishing a third-party RP system, it's called RPKX, cloud-based system. I was reassured that the conclusions that I just made in my last slide was reasonable, and it's desirable for us to have a tool to distribute RPK validated cache among different organizations over network. As illustrated in this figure, the RPKX implemented with RPSTER, the open source software, is now in service of provisioning the cache data to some organizations in China by distributing the cache data in JSON format over HTTPS to RTR servers. Deployment in networks of ISP or ICPs in China. So moving along to this slide, I am now presenting our consideration of the implementations. So as for the way of formatting data, we prefer to facilitate the data path for both visualization and applications other than route origin validation, as well as to take advantage of SLUM to do local control. And then we choose HTTPS as transport because it's widely supported. It is with security enhancement to offer integrity protection, and it is independent from protocol data unit. So if you are already familiar with RFC 8416 SLUM, you would find it easy to do RPK cache data update by the virtue of Slurm filters and Slurm assertions, which are responsible for deleting and adding cache data items respectively. So that's the reason why we choose JSON as a format to be in alignment with Slurm file format. In other words, we use Slurm file to describe cache data and its update. So I'd like to reiterate our motivation to do this. So RTR is over there. Why bother to do this? RTR is designed exclusively for providing RPK cache data for routers. So the RTR PDU is bound to transport, which is difficult to add some extensions. And some applications, which is not supported RTR, could not read the binary data offered by RTR. And we would also like to take advantage of just use one API to do both synchronization and local control, because the Slurm file is in JSON format, and so that's the reason why we do this. So here is a design of HTTP header for its use in transporting cache data. So it's inevitable for us to have got some HTTP header extension to signal what is piggybacked in the message body. So as we look at it, we can find an inside head that indicates some control information such as operating model, timestamp, version information, and a signature, which is for integrity protection, and also a body, inside body, which is actually a Slurm file. So our implementation supports both push and pull model. So in pull model, the HTTP client needs to indicate whether it wants a whole copy or it just needs an incremental update. So that's this is the most important reason why I talk about this. I think it's necessary to do standardized RPK vanity cache synchronization because synchronization could take place between different organizations, and the vanity cache receiver may change its provider. So at present, we have got a draft, but it's coming soon, and I hope it will be adopted as a working group item. So by the way, I will be also sharing our implementation code at GitHub for you guys to give it a try. And I also note the Cloudflare has made similar efforts, yet in a slightly different way. Anyway, we keep an open mind to any implementation details, and anyway, if anyone are interested in this work and can contribute to this, let's work together. And I hope the working group will consider whether this work is deserve our efforts to seek standardization. Thank you.
Jeff has, I'm confused slightly by the deployment scenario. Is this attempting to populate the caches that are supplying INET router to the routers themselves?
No, this mechanism is designed for the cache synchronization among different administrative organizations. So that's the use case.
Okay, so this does not actually touch the routers themselves?
It has nothing to do with the router.
Thank you.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. We actually ended up with some other format intermediate for the payload, the validated payload out of the crypto system. Yes, such a standardized interface. We actually have 3 different validators producing the same stuff. Quite certainly has some advantages for scaling the feeding of many routers, and the validated crypto payload, as I would call it, quite obviously has also other potential very interesting uses.
Okay, so I have one thing to add. So, as far as I observed, the implementation of Cloudflare and our RPX, they are both now is private implementation. Well, both working very well, but I think the community will benefit from standardized interface. So that's the motivation. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
Go for it. Oliver, you're up. Run fast.
I just want to interject something in the transfer presentation and the make before break issue. I forgot to give credit where due. This issue was raised by Nick Hilliard. I did not invent it. It's Nick.
Okay. Hello, my name is Oliver Borchert. I'm from NIST. So today I'm talking about the draft BGP sec validation signaling, which we proposed either last IETF or the IETF before. Give you an update. So since the last time we talked about it, we had a working group adoption call, and which was successful, but had some interesting discussions. The first discussion was that why would we need why would we need a new attribute for that? There's already the attribute RFC 8097 out there that signals the origin validation, and it has a long section for reserved, and we just could basically piggyback on the reserved field and add path validation to that. That would work very fine because the unverified state for us would have the value 0, and RFC 8097 sets this field as 0 on the sending side and has to be ignored on the receiving side. So that would give us some backwards compatibility to anyone who implemented the 8097. Furthermore, after the draft got accepted, there came some discussion about the validating BGP speaker, another draft out there that deals with origin validation on eBGP and has a second focus on the operational modes that can be configured. And there came the part of why don't we merge all these work together in one thing, so the whole thing is a little bit more organized. So Daniel Kopp from DE6 and we had some conversation about that and said, okay, his draft basically with these two sections of eBGP as well as the operational part, half of that also applies to what we want to do, and the other half, the operational mode, could be taken out as a BCP. So that was what we decided so far, and maybe some input from the working group would be good, especially in regarding to splitting the validation BGP speaker draft. And then the remaining portion in the validating BGP speaker, which would mainly deal with the operational modes and so forth, would be put into a BCP or informational draft, because everything that's written there is actually pretty good. So what does this mean for BGP sec validation signaling? We add some additional language or a little bit more clarifying language regarding to eBGP usage and clarify error handling. So the top part is currently RFC 8097, where you have the long blob of reserved, and at the end you have the validation state. And we update that by using the second to the last octet for path validation, and we rename the validation state field into origin validation to clarify which validation state is in which octet. Furthermore, we add the validation state, the lower part, where we have 0 for unverified, 1 for valid, and 2 for not valid. That are the BGP-SEC states that are defined in, or at least the valid, non-valid, or the BGP-SEC states defined in 8205. We went ahead and did one further thing. In the 8097, the fields are considered lookup result, and we renamed that into validation state because it makes much more sense. You signal the validation state, so why not calling it like that? So regarding eBGP signaling, RFC 8097 actually allows eBGP signaling. It has a wording of warranted situations, where two adjacent ASs under the control of the same administration, for example, or the other example, what is as a warranted situation is basically CIDR which is a link to the BGP, to the draft, what I explained before from, which one is called? Validating BGP speaker. Yeah. So we propose a change in this wording to say implementations must provide a configuration mechanism to allow the use of the community in both sending and receiving. And the implementers should enable the use for this community on all IBGP sessions and should by default disable it on eBGP sessions to make it more clear. And yeah. Then error handling, currently 8097 has an indirect error handling in there. It mainly deals with if the attribute occurs more than once in the BGP update. Currently it says disregard all instances except the one with the largest integer value, and that gives a little bit problem if we have not two integer values in there. So we say, okay, if we have more than one instance, then disregard all of them and apply the strategy similar to the attribute disregard. So now some thought. So that's the changes what we have right now, and I uploaded the document yesterday. It's just take some time, read over it. Now the current path is to update 8097 to add these part. But the question is, where we add so much more wording and also we change or we add other things, if it wouldn't make more sense to obsolete 8097 rather than update 8097. I think that's something that should be discussed. Another thought, currently the draft is BGP-SEC validation signaling, and we definitely should rename that in path validation and origin validation signaling because it definitely deals now with both. Questions?
Job Snijders, NTT. Unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure you're heading in the right direction by merging the allegedly called validating BGP speaker draft into this. I'm not sure if you're aware of the extreme controversy that draft has generated and absolutely failed to reach consensus. It is very disappointing to see it resurface yet again, while there are tens of comments unaddressed, and within the IETF process, it is not the best quality of work. So I think when you set out to specify extended communities to signal BGP-SEC validation states, that is a laudable goal, but then perhaps you accidentally stepped into something that doesn't smell as nice and that may drag down the effort that you set out to originally accomplish. In other words, if you fate share with a draft that was not well received, it will complicate your original goal.
And I hear what you say. The only part of the merging what we do here is actually that we take the eBGP signaling into the BGP-SEC transfer. And for BGP-SEC, that actually makes perfectly sense.
I want to comment on
but
that
but
specifically.
the other part is we stay completely clear of the whole operational mode and all this kind of stuff. Nothing of that is in this draft at all. So maybe
if I can respond,
yeah, sure.
I understand where you're coming from, but the SIDROPS working group does not get to redefine what transitivity means in BGP attributes. That is outside our scope, and a non-transitive extended community will not in this working group be redefined as, well, it's now suddenly transitive. And it is a mistake that in the 8097 draft, that it suggested that, well, perhaps it could be transitive. No, that sentence should never have been there. That's a bug in the draft. And you will meet opposition from implementers and operators if that part of the church is spray painted. So this is a technical issue because BGP implementations do not behave that way. Putting it in a draft will not help.
Okay.
So I would recommend to not proceed with the merge and proceed with what you originally set out to do. That will make the chances of success higher.
Okay, thanks.
John Scudder. Two things. One is, personally, I would take no offense at if you obsoleted 8097 and just rolled it in. That would be fine with me. The second thing is on your, can you wind back to your error slide? Yeah, that one.
Yep.
That looks like a downgrade attack to me. Because if you pick the numerically highest one, that's sort of the least desirable validation state. And that's going to be less desirable than the lack of signaling of any validation state, which is what the bottom box does. So that, I mean, we can take it to the list, but that doesn't seem like a desirable strategy to me.
I think we should bring it to the list because the only problem is what I see currently. Now we have two validation state in there. And let's say, for example, we have one attribute that says origin validation invalid and path validation valid. And the other one says path validation invalid and origin validation valid. So now I have the problem, do I start cherry picking the values out of them and take the highest integer value and I take information of multiple attributes, what I don't know if this is the right way to go as well, or which one do I now choose? Do I prefer origin over path or path over origin? So I think there's definitely some discussion needed. That's why I said, okay, the easiest way in this regard to deal with that is if I have these problem what I have to solve somehow. If I say, okay, if I shouldn't see more than one anyhow. That's the first thing. Why would I see more than one attribute in the update? So, but yeah.
Randy Bush, IJ Anarchist. The reason you should is careful rereading the BGP spec says that you also have to check origin. As John Scudder said, obsoleting 8097 probably is not at all harmful. There is actually a subsequent RFC blah, blah, blah clarifications whose number I cannot quote, which throws away a significant part of 8097. And because it was ill-advised, 8097 is one of a small number of RFCs, which has my name on it, to which I formally objected in working group last call and in IETF last call.
Jeff Haas, I own an implementation with a policy engine that has to look at this stuff. You do not want to put these things both into the same community. The primary reason for this is there's a lot of, if you flip back to the community description, a lot of people that have policy out there that is matching against, basically, you scroll, keep going, go. One more. Extended community, there you go. There's an awful lot of people that have policy that says, match community 4300, bunch of zeros, and then number 1, 2, or 3. And it is done as an exact match type thing. Despite the fact that, it says reserved, most people, if they're doing something slightly smarter for match purposes, might do regular expressions, but regular expressions suck for performance. So a lot of people don't do that. The consequence here is that if you overload it, you don't have a bunch of zeros in the middle in there anymore, and you'll no longer match the thing. You'll basically have an incomparable number, and you'll jump into the wrong spot of your policy code.
So your suggestion is to keep them separate?
Yes.
Keep them separate.
As we had originally.
Yeah,
That's
it's
fine.
as an extra community. It's not a big deal. It'd be nice if engines didn't work this way. You're a victim of what I like to call magic extended communities. All of the validation procedures you give is an attempt to choose one out of many because it's magic.
Okay.
Actually, if I can quickly interject, I was myself contemplating whether we do this as a separate community or not, but I think Jeff raises a really, really good point, and you probably want to take this out.
Yeah, no, that I think that's all very, very well good points, and I think there's some discussion that has to be done on the list regarding.
And that pretty much also answers your second question, whether you want to obsolete the existing RFC or not. Just leave it as is.
Oh.
Doug Montgomery, just a quick question, I guess, for John's comment is I'm not sure I understand the threat scenario that if you're in a position to somehow on the wire insert a second one of these communities, aren't you equally in a position just to strip them all?
I don't want to try to defend it right now.
I'm not sure it's a vulnerability that you don't already have if that's your threat.
I only want to respond to that if I'm not taking away from the rest of the agenda.
There's no more agenda. Last 3 minutes is all yours.
Okay, there we go. So still John Scudder. Yeah, I don't want to try to defend it as an attack, even though I used that word. I guess sort of putting it in more neutral language, the error handling that was proposed on that slide is sort of less stringent than what was. You've changed the semantics. You've changed the semantics to something that will accept routes that were previously rejected, and that made my knee jerk. If you subsequently analyze the case and sort of convince me that, John, even though we're letting in routes that you were previously going to drop on the floor, it's okay. Hey, okay. But I think that, I think Jeff's comment kind of moots the whole thing.
Yes.
So, we probably don't need to dig into it further.
So you're going to do some more work on this, and okay, great. Make sure I didn't misunderstand the end result. All right. Yes, Yob. I think just one.
No. Two.
Oh, there were two. So there'll be. We'll find it. Don't worry about it.
A question of Job Snyder's NTT. A question about procedure. The draft IETF SIDROPS validating BGP speaker, which is of course anything but validating, did not reach consensus. What is the current status in the working group? How?
See you in Vancouver. No. I believe the end result of it was the authors could go back to try and make something sensible out of it, or we're not moving it forward any further. So right now, the working group doesn't care about it. It, I think, is the end result. Like, it's not part of our game plan. So
should we still consider it a working group document?
I don't know. Do we? Oh, I can kill it. Yeah. I think it's not on the list, right? Yeah.
Wait. It is currently a working group document because we inherited it from CIDR, and therefore it was before that it was an individual submission. So it currently may be a working group document, which anyway, we can take that on the mailing list.
Yeah.
That's what I want, but not maybe what the authors want.
I would say, like, please email the list and say, you said blah, 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 blah. Do we kill this now, or that would help. Thank you. See you in Vancouver. Bye.